I found out I was fired through a Slack notification. No warning, no meeting, no handshake in some glass-walled conference room. Just a cold system alert blinking across my laptop screen like it had something important to say. Access denied. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Server error. Maybe I refreshed the page. Logged out, logged back in. Same result. Then my calendar cleared itself out. A one meeting vanishing after another, like somebody was pulling my threads loose from the company. In real time, I stared at the empty screen, still waiting for an email, a text, a phone call, anything. Instead, the next thing that popped up was a mass announcement buried halfway down a generic HR newsletter. We wish Eli Bennett the best in his future endeavors. That was it, a footnote in their Friday communications blast right between Bagel Monday, Move to Tuesday, and Reminder Office Close for President's Day. It hit me like a baseball bat to the ribs. 7 years, hundreds of 12-hour days, vacations canceled, birthdays missed, sleepless nights, wrestling with broken systems. They didn't even understand, and they dismissed me like a typo in a memo. Nobody reads. For a second, I just sat there staring at the screen. I didn't slam the laptop shut. I didn't start shouting like I wanted to. My hands were resting flat on the desk, palms up like I was still expecting someone to hand me an explanation, but nobody did. Across the open floor, people were moving, smiling, talking about the Super Bowl, about their kids' soccer games, about whatever dumb Netflix show was trending. None of them noticed the moment my entire career shattered right in front of me. Or maybe they did, and they just didn't want to be the next one. I reached for my coffee, realized it was already cold, and set it back down without drinking. My stomach was tight, twisted into a knot that was pulling tighter by the second. Still no text, no call, no apology. I clicked into my email. My personal account, this time, the one no one at work could touch. There it was, a single message from HR, timestamped at 2:03 a.m. Subject line, separation agreement. No name, no explanation. Just a form letter thanking me for my service and inviting me to review the attached documents at my earliest convenience. My earliest convenience, right? I sat back in my chair and let the weight of it all sink in. Not because I didn't see it coming, I had, but because even knowing the ship was sinking doesn't prepare you for the moment. The water actually hits your boots. In the distance, I could hear the elevator dinging. Someone was laughing near the break room. Somebody else dropped a stapler. The world didn't stop for me. It didn't even slow down. I thought about all the nights I'd spent building their back-end system from scratch. After the last company merger nearly killed us, the emergency patches, the server overhauls, the 2 a.m. troubleshooting calls when the CTO couldn't figure out why a database was locked. It hadn't mattered. None of it had mattered. They hadn't just fired me. They'd erased me. It wasn't the loss of the paycheck that gutted me. It wasn't even the title, though. It had taken years to earn it. It was the silence, the way they made it feel like I had never been there at all. I stood up slowly, feeling the blood drain from my hands, my fingers stiff and clumsy. My heart was pounding, but you couldn't see it from the outside. From the outside, I looked calm, collected, but inside something was breaking in a way I knew would never heal quite right. I didn't say goodbye to anyone, didn't pack up anything but my jacket, my keys, and a battered leather notebook I kept hidden in the bottom drawer. The one where I wrote down every system design, every emergency workaround, every stupid fix that kept the company alive long after it should have crashed. I didn't look back as I walked out of the building. I didn't need to. They'd already made it clear I wasn't part of their future. And they had no idea what they had just set in motion. I walked across the parking lot like a ghost, barely feeling the wind cutting through my jacket. Somewhere along the way, the sun had dipped low enough to drag long shadows across the asphalt. My truck was parked at the far edge, backed into a corner spot. Like always, a habit born from years of not trusting anyone to park next to me. I climbed in without thinking, turned the key, and just sat there. As the engine hummed quietly, no radio, no music, no distractions. Just the low, steady growl of the engine and the hollow sound of my own breathing. My hands found the steering wheel, gripping it tight enough that my knuckles turned white. I stayed like that for a long time, staring through the cracked windshield at nothing. It would have been easy to punch the dashboard, to slam the door, to scream until my throat burned. But I didn't. Instead, I loosened my grip, exhaled slow, and reached for the half-empty bottle of water in the cup holder. I took a sip. It tasted like dust. Across the lot, the building still glowed, glass walls shining with all the energy of a machine that didn't care who it crushed along the way. Someone inside was probably setting up for happy hour already. Finger foods, cheap beer, fake smiles. I pulled out my phone, not even sure why. No missed calls, no new texts. The only notification was a reminder I'd set weeks ago. System audit meeting, 4:00 p.m. A meeting I wasn't even invited to anymore. I deleted it with a flick of my thumb and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. It landed face down with a dull thud like a final period at the end of a story nobody bothered to finish reading. Still no anger came, no tears. Just this cold, quiet ache settling into my chest, heavy as concrete. I tapped the brakes, shifted into reverse, and pulled out without checking my mirrors. The lot was mostly empty anyway. Everyone important was still inside, clinking glasses, toasting to new beginnings without even realizing what they'd torn down to get there. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every stoplight stretched into an endless wait. Every turn felt heavier, like I was dragging dead weight behind me. When I finally made it back to my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I just dropped my keys on the kitchen counter, kicked off my boots, and sank into the old leather couch that creaked under my weight. The familiar smell of worn leather and cold coffee wrapped around me like a threadbare blanket. I sat there in the dark, listening to the refrigerator hum and the distant sounds of tires on wet pavement outside. I could have called someone. My brother would have picked up on the first ring. He always did. Old friends would have dragged me out for beers and bad advice. But I didn't want company. I didn't want sympathy. I needed the silence I needed to feel the hurt without anyone trying to patch it over with cheap words. Somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't just about losing a job. It was about being discarded. Like nothing I built ever mattered, about the kind of betrayal you can't fight with fists or lawsuits because it cuts deeper than either. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, head hanging low between my shoulders. The floorboards creaked when I shifted my weight, but otherwise the apartment stayed quiet, like it was holding its breath right along with me. No anger, no plans, no revenge, not yet. Just the slow, heavy weight of it all settling onto my back. And for the first time in a long time, I let it. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark before the past started creeping in, sharp and unwanted. It hit me out of nowhere those first days at Redmond Dynamics. Before the glass walls, before the corporate buzzwords, before they decided they were too good to need people like me. I remembered the nights I stayed late eating stale vending machine pretzels for dinner, because the deployment had to happen before sunrise. The worn-out hoodie I used to keep draped over my chair, the one everyone joked about but never dared touch, because they knew I wasn't leaving until the job was done. Back then, we were a team. Real team, not the fake kind plastered across LinkedIn. Posts with matching t-shirts and forced smiles. It was sweaty, brutal work, duct taping systems together at 2 a.m., chasing bugs like they were rats on a sinking ship. Nobody cared about titles. Nobody gave a damn about office politics. It was just us against the chaos, and somehow that felt like enough. I remembered Mark, the old CTO, with the bad knee patting me on the back after my first all-nighter. "You're the kind of guy companies forget they can't live without," he said, handing me a gas station coffee so strong it could have stripped paint. Back then, I believed him. Hell, back then, I believed in a lot of things. I believed hard work was armor. I believed loyalty mattered. I believed if you built something strong enough, good enough, it would stand, no matter who was in charge. Turns out none of that's bulletproof against ambition. Somewhere along the line, the vibe changed. It was small at first, like noticing your favorite bar replace the jukebox with a Spotify playlist. Tiny things, harmless things. Until one day you looked up and didn't recognize the place anymore. I could still see the team lunches. We used to have plastic tables set up in the server room because we didn't have space anywhere else. Cold pizza, warm soda, laughter echoing off the concrete floors. No suits breathing down our necks yet. And later, the first system launch. How we all stood crammed together, sweaty and exhausted, watching the green lights blink across the dashboard like Christmas came early. We weren't just employees back then. We were builders. And builders know when the foundation's rotting, long before anyone else smells the smoke. I guess I should have known too. I guess I did know. The first time I caught Elias Monroe in the server bay, nodding like he understood the guts of the thing, when it was obvious he couldn't tell a load balancer from a light switch. The first time he called my system just a back-end framework, like it was a coat of paint instead of the steel beams holding the whole damn building up. That was when the cracks started showing. I remembered standing there watching him and feeling something tighten low in my gut, the way a man feels when he knows the ice beneath his boots is thinner than it looks. But I pushed it down, told myself it was just nerves, told myself it didn't matter who sat in the big chair if the work was solid enough. Another lie. I leaned back into the couch, feeling the old leather strain under me, and let the memories hit me like waves. good, bad, and everything in between. The loyalty, the pride, the slow, steady betrayal that creeps in when you're too damn stubborn to look it straight in the eye. It wasn't just a job they stripped from me. It was the history they pretended never existed. The blood and sweat written into every line of code. The nights my car was the last one left in the parking lot, headlights off city lights, flickering in the distance like reminders that the world keeps moving even when you're bleeding out in place. And in that dark, empty apartment, I realized something I hadn't let myself admit before. They didn't just fire me. They tried to erase me. And somewhere deep inside, a part of me started to stir. Not broken, not beaten, just awake. Very awake. The first red flag didn't show up like a car crash. It crept in quiet, smooth, almost polite. I remember sitting in a Monday morning sink, the kind they used to call all hands, before the term got corporate sterilized into alignment briefings. New faces kept popping onto the Zoom grid consultants Elias brought in from firms I'd never heard of. Guys with sparkling smiles, shiny resumes, and absolutely no clue what our core systems actually did. They talked a lot about agility, pivot strategies, and scaling for growth. Big words, fancy slides. Not once did any of them ask about server uptime, database failovers, or redundancy protocols. You know, the stuff that kept the lights on. At first, I told myself it was harmless. Let them play dress up with their buzzwords. The engineers, the real backbone, knew what mattered. But then came the budget cuts. Not the big dramatic kind, the slow surgical kind. First, the server refresh was postponed, then maintenance contracts reviewed for efficiency. After that, security audits streamlined right out of existence. I sat through those meetings watching Elias smile and nod, like he was blessing us all with innovation, while gutting everything that made our systems bulletproof. And no one else seemed to notice. Or if they did, they didn't want to be the one who said it out loud. It wasn't just infrastructure they started chopping at either. One afternoon, HR quietly updated the PTO policy. Sick days started needing manager pre-approval. Remote work requests got buried under operational priority assessments. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. People stopped chatting at their desks, stopped laughing in the break room. Conversations got shorter, safer, more loaded with "per my last email" and "just looping back" nonsense. Even the veterans, the ones who used to shoot the breeze about March Madness or trade barbecue recipes, started keeping their heads down, tapping at keyboards like prisoners counting days on a wall. Then came the seating changes. They called it dynamic workspace optimization. In reality, it was musical chairs designed to break up old alliances. I found my desk moved from the systems wing down to the second floor wedged between business development and marketing. No more engineers on either side of me, just suits tapping out client pitches and campaign decks. I wasn't supposed to feel it, but I did. The slow, cold isolation. Like they were pushing me toward the edge without actually saying the words. The final sign should have been the quarterly roadmap meeting. Every quarter, we used to sit around a beat-up oak conference table, tossing ideas, mapping strategy on whiteboards so stained you could read the last 5 years of plans underneath. This time, they sent a PowerPoint deck ahead of time, pre-approved, bullet-pointed, and sanitized for mass consumption. No input requested, no questions allowed. Just a smiling headshot of Elias on the cover and some slogan underneath. Innovation through leadership. What a joke. I watched the slideshow blink by on the conference room screen, sitting in a chair that suddenly felt way too small, way too temporary. Nobody mentioned the legacy systems. Nobody acknowledged the critical patches pending for 2 months. Nobody even used the word infrastructure anymore. They were already pretending the foundation didn't exist. And foundations, when ignored, don't crumble all at once. They rot silently, steadily, until the weight of everything built on top crushes it into dust. Walking out of that meeting, I knew something in my gut. They weren't just pushing me out. They were planning to build a new empire, and they were too blind to see. They were digging it straight into quicksand. I didn't have proof yet, but I could feel it humming under my skin like a live wire. Something was coming. Something worse than being forgotten. And this time I wasn't going to ignore it. I didn't rage, I didn't stomp around or slam doors like some angry kid who just got benched. No, what I did was a whole lot quieter, a whole lot deadlier. First thing a Monday morning, when I walked into the office, just like always. Same worn leather boots, same battered thermos full of black coffee. I nodded at the security guard, scanned my badge, and smiled like nothing was wrong. But everything had shifted. I made my rounds casual as hell, checking server racks, update logs, code repositories. Not because I cared about the quarterly KPIs anymore, but because I needed a full inventory of what they had and what they thought they owned. By noon, I'd copied every critical document I'd personally authored onto a private encrypted drive, white papers, patents, internal memos. Even the old architecture diagrams drawn by hand, back when we didn't have a damn clue what we were doing. Anything with my fingerprints on it, I backed up twice, just in case. On my lunch break, I drove 2 towns over and opened a safe deposit box under a name they didn't know. Inside, I stashed a clean hard drive, a signed copy of my employment agreement, and a notarized copy of the original IP ownership contract I'd fought like hell to secure 5 years ago. It was all there in black and white. Ownership of core system designs belonged to me personally, not Redmond Dynamics. A little clause they never bothered to renegotiate when Elias took the wheel. Sloppy, arrogant, exactly what I was counting on. I also pulled up my financials that night, painstakingly going through every account, every investment, every debt. I set up a secondary bank account outside the usual big names, someplace local where nobody from the company's vendor list would think to look. Then I moved enough cash to survive 6 months without lifting a finger. No warning. No alerts sent, just a silent firewall between me and the fallout. I could feel inching closer. Next, I started compiling emails. Every red flag. Elias had thrown out the sketchy roadmap in canceled maintenance, the denied audit requests. I archived them off the company server onto a separate cloud drive, locked down tighter than Fort Knox. 2-factor authentication tied to a burner phone. They'd never trace back to me. If they were going to bury me, they'd have to dig through a mountain of evidence first. I didn't talk to anyone, didn't tip my hand, not even to people I trusted, because trust was a currency I couldn't afford to spend anymore. Instead, I showed up every day, punched my badge, answered emails with fake enthusiasm, and took notes. Lots of notes. Meeting minutes, Slack threads, project revisions. Elias approved without review. All cataloged, time-stamped, cross-referenced, like I was building a case for trial. Because in a way, I was only difference, the jury wouldn't be a group of strangers. It would be the system itself, the one I built, the one they couldn't function without, even if they thought they could replace me with a handful of buzzwords and shiny new hires. Every move I made during those weeks was calculated, measured, surgical. I wasn't scrambling, I was fortifying, because I knew something they didn't. When you're going up against a regime that thinks it's invincible, you don't scream and beat your chest. You load your gun, you check your footing, and you wait for the right moment to pull the trigger. The truth didn't come crashing through the front door. It slipped in under it, quiet, oily, and thick enough to choke on. It started with a misdirected email. Late one Thursday night, after most of the office had cleared out for happy hour, I stayed behind, pretending to troubleshoot a phantom latency issue no one else had the patience to fix. While flipping through system error reports, a new message landed in my inbox. The sender meant it for Elias, but thanks to a fat-fingered autocomplete, it came straight to me. Subject line, final acquisition terms. Acquisition. I clicked it open before my brain could talk me out of it. Inside was a forwarded chain between Elias and a rep from a private equity group I vaguely recognized, Renshaw Holdings vultures in expensive suits, who bought out companies, gutted them for IP, and left carcasses behind. The thread laid it out in plain English. The entire infrastructure, my infrastructure, was being bundled and sold off as a proprietary product suite tied to Redmond's valuation. A big shiny bow slapped across systems I personally designed, coded, and maintained. No licensing agreements mentioned. No credit attribution. Nothing about my patents. They weren't just replacing me. They were cashing out on my work without a cent coming my way. The deal was already drafted. Signatures pending. Closing date, 6 weeks out. I stared at the screen, feeling the blood drain out of my face, my hands going clammy against the keys. It wasn't about loyalty. It wasn't about new directions or changing business landscapes. It was about profit. Pure and simple. They wanted to flip Redmond like a fixer-upper house on a bad street, and everything I built was just drywall to them. My stomach twisted so hard I had to stand up and pace, running a hand over my jaw to keep from slamming my fist through the monitor. It would have been easy to miss it. If I hadn't stayed late, if I hadn't kept watching. Easy for them, not for me. I pulled the message into a private archive immediately, then dove headfirst into the file systems and shared drives searching for anything else that might have slipped through the cracks. What I found made my skin crawl. Board meeting notes hidden under folders labeled Q3 Marketing Initiatives. Slide decks mapping out transition plans with my architecture diagram, scrubbed clean of any attribution. Emails between Elias and the CTO discussing the seamless integration of legacy systems, which was just a fancy way of saying rip the guy's name off and pretend we built it ourselves. They didn't even bother encrypting half of it. Arrogance makes people sloppy. By the time the sun came up Friday morning, I had enough evidence to make a lawyer salivate. I sat there, eyes burning from staring at screens too long, watching the first weak rays of daylight spill over the tops of the downtown skyline. Part of me wanted to drive straight to Elias's overpriced condo, pound on his designer door, and shove the printed documents in his smug face. But I didn't, because rage is a weapon you don't pull unless you're ready to go to war. Instead, I closed everything down, wiped my prints from the office systems, and walked out without a single soul knowing what I had in my back pocket. My head was pounding. My heart wasn't. It was steady now, cold, calculating. They thought they could steal from me and ride off into the sunset without a scratch. They had no idea. I wasn't the obstacle standing in their way. I was the storm they had just invited into their house. And they left the front door wide open. I didn't charge in, fists swinging. I set the table, carefully, precisely. First, I called in a favor. An old buddy of mine, Zach Monroe, works cybersecurity for a law firm downtown. Guys who specialized in IP disputes in corporate espionage cases. I didn't tell him everything over the phone, just enough to get a meeting behind closed doors. Saturday morning, I walked into his office with a thumb drive in my jacket pocket and a look he recognized immediately. No small talk, no catching up over bad coffee. I dropped the drive onto his desk. Need to know if I have enough to cook these bastards alive, I said. Zach plugged it in, his eyebrows rising higher with every folder he opened. 20 minutes later, he leaned back, whistling low. If this is legit, Eli, you're sitting on a damn grenade. I nodded once. Good, now help me aim it. He drafted a cease and desist letter, clean and brutal, citing specific patent numbers tied to system architecture. Redmond Dynamics was trying to sell as their own. No threats, no grandstanding, just cold legal teeth. We scheduled the delivery for maximum impact Monday morning, right as the acquisition team was set to finalize the paperwork. But a letter alone wouldn't be enough. I needed them rattled, exposed. So I set bait. Sunday evening, I sent Elias a text from an untraceable burner line. Simple, direct. You might want to check your legal exposure before popping champagne tomorrow. No name, no threat, no signature. Just enough to twist a knife into his nerves. After that, I waited. I didn't go home. I didn't sleep. I holed up in a crummy motel room off the interstate blinds drawn TV, buzzing static in the background. Pacing, thinking, reviewing every contingency twice. I wasn't naive enough to think they'd fold right away. People like Elias don't admit defeat. They double down until they either win or implode, which worked fine for me. Either outcome played into my hands. At sunrise, I suited up, not in some fancy tailored getup, but in jeans, a plain black tee, and a bomber jacket that had seen better days. Armor in its own way. Downtown buzzed with Monday morning energy suits, hustling for coffee, traffic, snarling at every light. The city pretending it wasn't quietly devouring itself. I found a seat at a cafe across the street from Redmond's headquarters, ordered the strongest black coffee they had, and settled in by the window, watching, waiting. Sure enough, just after 8, the chaos began. First, 3 frantic phone calls in a row from the company's main line ignored, then a series of panicked emails flooding my burner account, urgent, requesting immediate clarification. Can we set up a call? This must be a misunderstanding. Yeah, a real misunderstanding, like forgetting a loaded gun on the table and wondering why the room went quiet. At 8:37, Zach sent me a confirmation text. Notice delivered, clocks ticking. That's when I saw him. Elias storming through the lobby, phone pressed to his ear, face twisted into something ugly and desperate. The predator, realizing for the first time he wasn't at the top of the food chain. I sipped my coffee, slow savoring it. Across the street, the empire he tried to steal crumbled one email at a time. And I hadn't even played my final card yet. Because this wasn't just about scaring them. It was about making sure they knew every second they delayed, every lie they spun, every attempt to salvage the deal would cost them more. More time, more money, more blood. I wasn't swinging wild. I wasn't yelling. I was building pressure pound by pound until something cracked. And judging by the look on Elias's face, it wouldn't be long now. It didn't take long for the walls to buckle. By mid-morning, word started leaking out of Redmond's executive suite faster than they could plug it. Whispers at first, scattered looks across cubicles. Managers huddled in glass-walled offices pretending they weren't panicking. But you can smell fear if you know what to look for. Emails froze, calendar invites disappeared. Meetings that had been color-coded and blocked weeks in advance suddenly vanished into thin air. From my seat across the street, I watched the building shift from organized chaos to sheer disarray. Phones glued to ears. Security guards called to the lobby. the receptionist nervously clutching papers she couldn't explain. Elias showed up around 10 wearing the same $1,000 suit but none of the swagger. His jaw was tight, his tie loosened just enough to scream that the morning hadn't gone the way he expected. Good. Through the window, I spotted him in heated conversation with two men in dark suits outside council, no doubt scrambling to patch the ship before it sank. But some holes you can't plug with lawyer speak and backroom deals. Around noon, the first wave hit. A news alert popped up on my burner phone. Renshaw Holdings delays Redmond Dynamics acquisition over IP concerns. Boom, not an official cancellation. Not yet, but the language was brutal. Unresolved legal exposure. Material risk to technology assets. Pending external review. Translation, the buyers smelled blood, and they weren't going to pay full price for a company bleeding credibility all over the sidewalk. I leaned back in my chair, letting the moment settle into my bones. This wasn't revenge. It was truth, finding its way out through the cracks they thought they could paint over. Inside the building, you could see the unraveling happen in real time. IT teams rushing between floors, faces pale, directors pacing like inmates before a riot, the marketing department frantically pulling down press releases that now made them look like fools. At 1:15, a black Lincoln pulled up to the front entrance. Two men in dark blazers stepped out carrying hard-sided briefcases. I recognized them immediately. Regulatory consultants. The sharks were in the water now. By 2 o'clock, the conference room lights on the top floor blazed to life in emergency session. Everyone who mattered was in that room. Everyone who thought they were untouchable. I imagined the conversation swirling inside who knew who signed off. How exposed are we? How fast can we spin this? None of them would be able to agree because they weren't built for defense. They were built for acquisition bonuses, for glossy investor decks and shallow talking points. Not for war, not for someone like me. At 2:37, I got a call, unknown number. I didn't answer. Then a voicemail. Eli, we believe there's been a misunderstanding. We value your contributions greatly. Let's schedule time to discuss a path forward that works for everyone. I deleted it without listening to the rest. Path forward, now they wanted to talk. Now that the building was burning and nobody could find the fire extinguisher, too late. Way too late. The final crack came just after 3. Internal memo leaked, not to me directly, but to a popular tech blog that loved nothing more than a good corporate scandal. Headline, Redmond Dynamics caught in IP debacle. Acquisition in jeopardy. Subheading, sources cite failure to secure key system ownership rights. The internet lit up like a brush fire. By 5 o'clock, it was trending nationwide. By 6, Redmond's stock price started bleeding out. By 8, it was clear the deal was dead. And Elias, he was nowhere to be seen. I closed my laptop slowly, letting the weight of it all settle into my chest. Not triumph, not gloating. Just an ending. One they wrote themselves. I just made sure everyone got a front row seat to watch it fall apart. Tuesday morning came cold and gray. The kind of weather that settles into your bones whether you invite it or not. I didn't bother dressing up. Faded jeans, scuffed boots, a plain thermal shirt under my jacket. I wasn't there to impress anyone. Redmond's parking lot, usually packed with shiny imports and overpriced SUVs, looked like a ghost town. Half the execs must have been working remotely or hiding. I walked through the front doors like I still belonged there. Nobody stopped me. The receptionist, a new kid I didn't recognize, looked up, opened his mouth to say something, then thought better of it. Smart. The elevator ride up felt longer than it should have, the kind of heavy silence you can almost hear ticking. 7th floor executive suites. When the doors slid open, I stepped out into a war zone dressed up in business casual, boxes stacked against walls, papers shredded in conference rooms. Half the offices stripped bare, like someone had sounded an alarm and everyone scrambled for cover. At the end of the hall, Elias stood with 2 security guards red-faced and shouting into a phone he could barely keep in his hand. I didn't slow down, didn't hesitate. He saw me coming, tried to square his shoulders like it would somehow erase the last 48 hours. It didn't. I stopped a few feet from him. No anger, no shouting. Just a weight between us that neither of us could dodge anymore. He opened his mouth. Eli, he started, voice hoarse. I held up a hand, not to hit him, to shut him up. We're done, I said. No heat, no drama. Just fact. You don't call me, you don't email me, you don't send some poor HR rep to clean up your mess. I let the words land one by one. You don't owe me an apology. You can't buy your way out of this. He tried again, desperation bleeding through the cracks in his slick practice mask. There's a way we can fix this. I cut him off with a short shake of my head. No, there's not. A few people had poked their heads out of nearby offices, pretending to check their phones while eavesdropping, like their lives depended on it. Let them watch. Let them see what consequence looked like. You gambled with something you didn't understand, I said low, almost conversational, and you lost. I didn't wait for his reply. There was nothing left to say. I turned and walked. Every step down that hallway felt like shedding another layer of weight I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. Past the conference rooms, the glass offices, the framed motivational posters peeling slightly at the corners, past the remnants of the life I'd given too many years to. I hit the elevator button once. No second thoughts, no backward glances. When the door slid open, I stepped inside and faced forward, catching a glimpse of my reflection in the brushed steel panel. I looked tired, but not broken. The doors closed. That was it. No final showdown, no Hollywood ending, just a man walking away from a place that no longer deserved him. As I crossed the parking lot to my truck, the first drops of rain started to fall cold and sharp against my skin. I didn't run. I didn't pull up my collar. I let the rain hit me, soak into me, wash the last of it off. Freedom didn't come with trumpets or fanfare. It came with silence, heavy, real, final. And for the first time in months, I wasn't carrying their mistakes on my back anymore. I was free, and I knew exactly where I was heading next. I didn't move fast after walking away. There wasn't some grand comeback waiting around the corner. No investors waving fat checks, no newspaper articles printing my name in gold. Just me and the long road ahead. At first, it felt strange waking up without an alarm clock, buzzing me into someone else's schedule. I'd spent years living on other people's deadlines, measuring success by meetings attended and fires put out. Now the calendar was blank. The first few days I slept hard. The kind of sleep you don't realize you're starving for until you finally let go. I canceled my lease on the downtown apartment too close to old ghosts and rented a small cabin 2 hours outside the city, tucked between stretches of pine and forgotten back roads. It wasn't fancy. Wood stove, spotty cell service, no neighbors within shouting distance. Perfect. I spent mornings chopping firewood, evenings walking the ridgeline behind the cabin, boots kicking up dust and gravel. There's something about manual work that scrapes the noise out of your head, something real about splitting a log, clean down the middle when words and lawsuits fail. The old leather journal I'd once crammed full of code diagrams now held sketches for a consulting firm. Not a flashy one, not a synergy solutions monstrosity, just real work. Building systems for companies that actually gave a damn, helping the ones who valued strength over buzzwords. No corner offices, no empty awards, just honest architecture. I picked my clients carefully. No VCs, no takeover artists. If your business plan relied on gutting your own people to get a better bonus, I wasn't your guy. Some months were leaner than others. Didn't matter. Because every project I touched bore my signature. Every deal was my choice. Freedom tastes different when you've bled for it. Some evenings after the sun dipped low and the crickets started tuning up, I'd sit on the porch with a beer in one hand and my dog Cooper, a mutt with more heart than most CEOs, snoring at my feet. I'd watch the sky darken, the first stars peeking through like shy kids sneaking out after curfew. And I'd think about everything I lost, everything I survived. Some wounds don't heal pretty. They scar, they itch on rainy days, but they remind you what you're made of when the world tries to grind you down. I never called Elias, never sent a letter, never gave him the satisfaction of hearing my voice again. Some fights are won by never stepping back into the arena. The silence itself is the victory. And looking back now, I realize I wasn't just rebuilding a career. I was reclaiming something deeper. Respect. Not the kind handed out like participation trophies. The kind you earn, the kind no boardroom backstab or botched acquisition can ever erase. The kind that lives inside your own damn chest. So here's my question to you. If you've made it this far, what are you still holding on to that someone else told you wasn't worth fighting for? And when are you finally going to reclaim it for yourself? Because if there's one thing I know better than anything now, it's this. You don't need a title to have worth. You don't need a corner office to have power. And you sure as hell don't need permission to take your life back. Sometimes the only thing standing between you and your real future is the courage to burn the old one down